a few words from my new swords and sorcery fantasy novel uh, called The Staff of Uthire. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you're sufficiently motivated by what you hear that you'll consider purchasing the book. It's available on Amazon, both as a paperback and also as a Kindle electronic edition. Yalgroth the Druid was anxious. He took no comfort from the peaceful whisper of the breeze in the tall cedars. The stars of Cygnus, the great swan, beckoned him on, but he had no knowledge of where the path he had set out would lead, and this lay heavy on his heart. Ahead, he half saw the cloaked figure of Sir Ambrose mounted on the great roan that was his pride and joy. The jingling of harness and the sound of muttered prayers confirmed that Dom Farsi was close behind. "How much further now, Ambrose?" the Druid called out in his strong bass voice. "I should know these woods, but they seem strange tonight, as if I'd never been here." "We're almost there, my lord Yalgroth," the knight replied. "The crescent moon gives little light, and I thought to take best advantage of the darkness by avoiding the main path. This way will lead just as surely to the gnome, and will not be seen by inquisitive eyes." Ambrose's confident words did little to lift Yalgroth's mood. He hunched his shoulders within the ivy-green and aquamarine robes and fur-lined brown leather cloak he wore. He couldn't dismiss the conviction that their enterprise was forlorn. They had so little to go on, and so few resources. During his years at court, he had come to rely heavily on the network of informants and agents which he had carefully built up. Those times were no more. Hence the need for the gnome. But why should he help? Yalgroth asked himself. What would he demand in return? The rascal owes me a few favours, it's true, but did the debt amount to him risking his life? Ah, well, if he, the sometime Chancellor of Glazareth, had been driven to opposing Grimwald, perhaps the gnome would find his own reasons. Finishing his Saturday evening litany, Farsi ap Tolan looked up at the constellation of the Swan. He felt the great bird to be watching him with its starry eye. But that was ridiculous. Tolan's beard! My imagination is running wild tonight, he scolded himself. He shook his head and fumbled under his grey-hooded mantle for the prayer beads which he hoped would help steady his nerves. He mustn't get carried away. The heavens knew there was every reason not to be calm, but calm he must be. Bold plans would be laid this night, and there would be no room for error. But if the gnome refuses to help us, what then? Disquiet welled up inside him, and he shivered in spite of the warm brown habit he was wearing. The gnome simply has to agree to help. Bronwyn will have prepared the ground. Bringing up the rear, the burly Earl Keith Barnard was already having second thoughts. Just how did I allow myself to be talked into this mad errand, he berated himself. Granted, I had already made myself unpopular at court, and my involvement with the Druid might be thought to amount to treason, yet the alternative of accepting enforced retirement at the hands of the Regent was less honourable still. He had made his opposition to involving the gnome clear right from the start. "Isn't our task difficult enough," he'd said, "without making matters worse by inviting along a couple of scoundrels?" Yalgroth just wouldn't listen, though. It wasn't all that surprising. If it hadn't been for the Druid's long-standing sponsorship and support, the gnome would have been clapped in the deepest of Tollenberg's dungeons years ago. Still, both Yalgroth and Bronwyn had insisted that if anyone knew where the crown regalia had been hidden, it would be the gnome. Lost in their private thoughts, the four travellers pressed on through the darkness of the forest. Polkinbrook could be heard gurgling to itself over on their left. The trees crowded closer, cutting off all but the occasional glimpses of the stars twinkling in the clear night sky, and the track they were following bent north to enter a wooded valley. After a mile or so it led to a shallow ford over the stream. The travellers paused to water their horses, then continued along the main path, which their track now joined. An owl hooted as they emerged into a clearing, and Farsi was surprised to see Yalgroth start as if from slumber. Since when were druids scared by owls? The priest asked himself. It must be nerves. The heavens know that we all have reason enough to be jumpy. Across the clearing, an almost sheer cliff face rose, at the foot of which lay a wide pool fed by a tinkling waterfall, the source of the stream they had been following for the past hour. First Polkin Brook, and now behold Polkin Falls and Polkin Pools, scoffed Ambrose. Our gnomish friend has little imagination and less modesty, really calling everything in sight after himself. That's hardly fair, Ambrose replied Jalgroth. His craft calls for a good deal of invention, and he's every right to name these things as he wishes. He's lived here long enough to remember most of these trees as saplings. He has come to define this place by his presence. Without him, this valley would be heartless. Not another of your excuses, Yalgroth, Earl Keith growled through his dark brown beard. I've heard enough of them, as far as this fellow's concerned. Do you defend him from the law simply for the sake of your precious trees? What about the victims of his scheming and thievery? The trees and this valley I value, and they are part of it, the druid agreed wearily. And those whose trinkets find their way here generally don't miss them greatly. However, as you well know, I've found Arian to be very useful before now. He is a mine of information. The paths travelled by those bent on what you might call mischief often pass close by his door, and not a few lead straight inside. We have, well, hardly a gentleman's agreement. Here Yalgroth smiled wryly. But still, I think we understand each other well enough. It amuses me to believe that Arian's baubles are more valued here than by any previous owners. Hardly a lesson in ethics, Yalgroth, remarked Farsi, but let that rest. Do you think he'll be able to help us? After all, why should he know where the regalia has been hidden? If he doesn't know, then you may yet have an idea who might, the druid replied. Also, I hope to persuade him to help us both with its recovery and with the rescue of Archbishop Shenley. It would be very useful to have him along with us, you know. But is he likely to be persuaded, do you think? Asked Ambrose. I fear not, admitted the druid. He'll probably think our business altogether too risky. And what then, my lord? Asked Farsi, trying to keep the scepticism out of his voice. Would you judge that our best path was still to attempt to jailbreak the Archbishop if we have no locksmith? We have no alternative, Yalgroth snapped back. We must have our legitimacy and a power base. The church under its rightful head is our best hope of both. Also, the clergy are a rich source of information. We must locate the crown before we can recover it, you know. If Arian doesn't know anything of where the regalia has been hidden, it's possible a village priest somewhere has the information we want. An ill-considered word from a guard on home leave is all that we require. It's surprising what the rural clergy get to hear. Also, the Archbishop will have access to means of divination, as you know well enough. But let us not dwell on such a possibility. Arian Polkingnome will help us. Sir Ambrose dismounted on the far side of the clearing, stretching slightly so as to relieve the ache in his back which the long day's ride had produced. He beckoned to his companions. Come along, we are expected. I hardly think Arian would appreciate being kept up half the night waiting while we debate his character on his own doorstep." He struck the side of a large boulder with a mailed fist. "Open up in there. You have tired and hungry visitors. Let us in." After exchanging nervous glances, the 3 other travellers rode up to his side and dismounted. They seemed to wait an age before the boulders shook slightly, then rolled smoothly aside to reveal a gnarled and whiskered face peering out from a lighted tunnel which led away into the cliff. A moment later a diminutive character emerged into the night air, clad in an eye-watering assortment of colours: green leggings, purple calf-high boots, and an orange jerkin with a heavy gold chain around his neck. "Greetings, Druid," the gnome hissed. "Your niece is here and has told me to expect you. Who are these others?" "Well met, old one," the Druid replied. "These are my companions, Dom Farsi ap Tolan and Earl Marshal Keith Barnard, Knight, Great Heart of the most chivalrous order of the Venerable Lamb. You know Ambrose already. May we come in? We have sore need of your counsel and aid." "Come inside then," the gnome beckoned to visitors to enter. "Leave your horses loose. It's sheltered over by the pool. They've plenty of grass out there and won't stray. There's food for you within, and beds made up. Bronwyn is waiting." The Druid spoke quietly to the 4 tired animals as they were stripped of saddle and harness. They whinnied and walked over to stand under the trees by the pool, joining a grey already there. "They're very tired and glad to rest now," he explained to the rest of his travelling companions. "That's right. Time to rest," Arian agreed. "Now come along, but mind your heads. My tunnel's made for gnomes, not great big hulking folk." The torrent of words continued as the companions were led along a corridor lit by glowing gems set in the walls. Ambrose was amazed at the wealth set so casually on display, but was distracted by more immediate concerns as the smell of a savoury stew wafted past his nostrils. His mouth began to water, and he realized just how hungry he was. After a few yards the tunnel turned sharply to the right and led to the foot of a flight of steep and narrow stairs. The polking gnome clambered up these on all fours with great alacrity. At the top their path was partly blocked by a half-open door. The gnome ducked around it, and Yalgroth, who was next behind, pushed it aside. He entered a room that was doubtless voluminous for a gnome, though rather low in the ceiling for the Druid's liking. Rising from a chair by the fireside was his niece. "Welcome, uncle," she exclaimed, tucking a few errant strands of auburn hair behind her ears. "You must be hungry. Our host has been most generous in his preparations." Bronwyn indicated their heavily laden table across the room. "I see you've brought our co-conspirators." She smiled as the others entered the room. "Well now, there's the food," Arian chattered. "Take off all that ridiculous metal, you two. There's no one going to start hitting you about with swords in here. Take a seat, my lord. Reverend sir, here by the fire. I'll just put the kettle back on to boil and give the stew a stir. All will be ready in a moment." Arian started bustling around the cramped room. The knights complied with the gnome's suggestion, though it was difficult to divest themselves of their armour in the low-roofed kitchen. Still, when the job was done, they were grateful to be free of it. They had arrived, but their adventure had hardly begun.